The alarm bells had been ringing for 3 hours straight across every Earth defense station. Ambassador Ji-hoon Kim stood in the command center of the orbital platform, watching the main screen with growing dread. 300 alien ships hung, in space like frozen tears, their crystal hulls catching the light of distant stars. They had appeared without warning at the edge of Earth's solar system. No radio signals, no advance notice, just sudden arrival and a message that had sent shockwaves through every government on the planet below. Submit to integration or face extinction. You have 72 hours to decide. Captain Salman Park turned away from her communication console, her face pale. Sir, we just received the final casualty estimates from Fleet Command. Ji-hoon did not want to hear the numbers, but he had to know. Tell me. Our combined forces would last approximately 6 hours against their fleet, Soman said quietly. Maybe less if they use weapons we have not seen before. Through the massive windows of the command center, Ji-hoon could see Earth hanging in space like a blue and white marble. 3 billion people lived on that world, going about their daily lives while death waited just beyond their moon. Humanity had always known this day might come. For 50 years, Earth's scientists had detected signals from deep space suggesting advanced civilizations existed among the stars. They had built defense fleets and orbital stations. They had trained soldiers and developed weapons, but nothing had prepared them for this. The aliens called themselves the Valkyrie Collective. Their ships were beautiful in a cold way, like sculptures made of living crystal. Each vessel was the size of a small city, and their formations moved through space with perfect precision. Any response from the other defense stations? Ji-hoon asked. Mars base reports the same readings we have, Soman replied. The lunar installations confirm 300 ships, all of unknown design. No weapons are currently charged, but our analysts believe each ship carries enough firepower to destroy a continent. Ji-hoon had been Earth's primary ambassador for 15 years. He had negotiated treaties between nations that had been enemies for centuries. He had prevented 3 wars and helped establish the Global Defense Initiative. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. The communication system crackled to life. Ambassador Kim, we have an incoming transmission from the alien fleet. Put it through to my private office, Ji-hoon said. He needed a moment to think before facing whatever was coming. His office was small but comfortable, with pictures of his family on the desk and books lining the walls. It seemed strange that such ordinary things might soon be destroyed by beings from another world. The communication screen flickered and came alive. What appeared before Ji-hoon was unlike anything he had ever seen. The alien was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Its features were sharp and angular, like something carved from pale stone. But it was the eyes that caught Ji-hoon's attention. They were large and dark, holding depths that spoke of age beyond human understanding. I am Prime Evaluator Theraxis of the Valkyrie Collective, the being said in perfect English. Its voice was like wind through crystal caves, beautiful and cold at the same time. I am Ambassador Ji-hoon Kim, representing the people of Earth, Ji-hoon replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I am curious about your species before we proceed with integration, Theraxis said, tilting its head to one side like a bird studying an interesting insect. We have observed your world for many cycles. We have seen your wars, your violence, your destruction of your own environment. Ji-hoon felt his heart sink. If the aliens had been watching Earth, they had seen humanity at its worst. Wars, pollution, hatred, greed, all the failures that humans tried so hard to overcome. Yet something puzzles us, Theraxis continued. Your species displays behaviors that do not fit our understanding of survival patterns. Explain why we should not simply cleanse this system and begin anew with a more suitable species. The question hit Ji-hoon like a physical blow. The alien was asking him to justify humanity's right to exist, to explain why 3 billion people deserved to live instead of die. Ji-hoon could have talked about human achievements, art that moved, the soul, music that spoke across all barriers, literature that captured the depths of human experience. He could have mentioned the great cities, the scientific discoveries, the moment when humans first stepped on another world. But as he looked into those ancient, emotionless eyes, something his grandmother had told him long ago came to mind. A simple story she had shared when he was just a child sitting by the fire on cold winter nights. "Before I answer your question," Ji-hoon said slowly, "may I tell you a story?" Theraxis blinked once, its expression unchanging. "What relevance does a story have to the survival of your species?" "This story might help you understand what makes us human," Ji-hoon replied. "It is about a dog." For the first time since the conversation began, the alien's perfect composure cracked slightly. In all the worlds the collective had conquered, across all the species they had evaluated, no representative had ever responded to the threat of extinction with a story about an animal. "A dog?" Theraxis repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes, a small white dog named Beku. This happened many years ago in a city called Seoul during a terrible war." Theraxis had expected pleading for mercy, offers of tribute, or desperate attempts at negotiation. Every species the collective had encountered had followed predictable patterns when faced with extinction. They bargained, they threatened, they begged, or they prepared to fight. None had ever offered to tell a story. "Proceed," Theraxis said finally, its curiosity overcoming its confusion. Ji-hoon settled back in his chair and began to speak. Outside his window, the earth continued its ancient rotation, unaware that its fate might depend on a story about a loyal dog who had waited faithfully for masters who would never return. "This happened during the Korean War," Ji-hoon began. "Bombs were falling from the sky, and families were fleeing the city to save their lives. In all this chaos and fear, there lived a small dog with fur as white as snow." As Ji-hoon spoke, something strange happened. The cold, perfect features of the alien seemed to soften slightly. Theraxis leaned forward, its ancient eyes focused entirely on the human ambassador. Neither of them knew that this simple story would change the course of galactic history. Neither understood that the fate of not just Earth but the entire collective hung in the balance of what happened next. All Ji-hoon knew was that his grandmother had been right about the power of simple truths. Sometimes the most important conversations began not with grand speeches or desperate pleas, but with the quiet words, "Let me tell you a story." Ji-hoon stood in the small room aboard the Earth defense ship. The alien's image floated before him like a ghost made of light. Theraxis looked nothing like the monsters from old Earth movies. It was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Its eyes were large and dark, holding secrets from 1,000 worlds. The alien had asked why humanity should not be destroyed. Ji-hoon could have talked about human art or science. He could have mentioned the great cities or the music that filled concert halls. Instead, he thought of his grandmother's wrinkled hands as she told him stories by the fire. "Before I answer your question," Ji-hoon said slowly, "may I tell you a story? It is about a dog." Theraxis tilted its head to one side. In all its long life, across all the worlds it had conquered, no species had ever answered the threat of death with a story about an animal. The alien's curiosity was stronger than its confusion. "Proceed," Theraxis said in its voice like wind through glass. Ji-hoon sat down in a chair and looked directly at the alien. "This happened many years ago in a city called Seoul. There was a war and bombs were falling from the sky. Families were running away to save their lives. In all this chaos, there lived a small white dog named Beku." The alien listened without moving. Ji-hoon continued his story. Beku lived with a family who loved him very much. The father worked in a factory. The mother took care of 3 children. Every morning, the father would catch a bus at the same stop. Beku would walk with him and wait until the bus came. Then the dog would go home. Theraxis processed this information. The story seemed simple, without any hidden meaning or strategy. When the war came closer to the city, Ji-hoon went on, the family had to leave quickly. They put their belongings in bags and hurried to catch the last bus out of the city. The father promised Beku they would come back for him. He said the dog should wait at the bus stop. They would return in a few days when the fighting stopped. Something in Ji-hoon's voice made Theraxis lean forward slightly. "The family never came back," Ji-hoon said quietly. "The war lasted much longer than anyone expected. The city was destroyed and rebuilt. Years passed, but every single day Beku went to that bus stop and waited. The alien's expression did not change, but something flickered in its dark eyes. For 3 years, that dog sat at the same spot every morning. He would stay there until evening, watching every bus that stopped. People in the neighborhood began to notice him. They were struggling to find food for themselves, but they started bringing scraps for Beku. Jihoon paused, remembering his grandmother's voice telling this same story. Children would sit with the dog after school. Old women would pat his head and whisper that his family would return soon, even though everyone knew they would not. Shop owners would leave bowls of water for him. Strangers passing by would stop to scratch behind his ears. Theraxis found itself analyzing human behavior patterns. The logical response would have been to ignore the animal or remove it. Instead, these humans chose to help a creature that served no purpose. The dog grew older and thinner, Jihoon continued. His white fur became gray, his steps became slow, but still every day he went to the bus stop and waited. And every day people continued to care for him. The alien waited for more, but Jihoon remained silent for a long moment. What happened to the dog? Theraxis finally asked. Beku died at the bus stop on a cold winter morning, Jihoon said simply. He was still waiting for his family to come home. Theraxis expected this to be the end, but Jihoon was not finished. The people of the neighborhood found him there. They could have simply removed the body and forgotten about him. Instead, they held a funeral for a dog they barely knew. They buried him near the bus stop where he had waited. They put up a small stone with his name on it. The alien processed this information with growing confusion. These humans had wasted resources on a dead animal that had contributed nothing to their survival. But the story does not end there, Jihoon said, looking directly into Theraxis' eyes. News of Beku's loyalty spread throughout the city, then the country, then the world. People began to visit his grave. They brought flowers and food. They told their children about the dog who never gave up waiting. Theraxis felt something it had not experienced in centuries. The emotion was unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Years later, they built a statue of Beku at that bus stop. Not because he was useful or important, but because he represented something humans value more than logic or survival. He represented love that asks for nothing in return. The alien found itself unable to speak for several moments. In all the collective's vast databanks, there was no protocol for this type of response. Your species chose to honor an animal that died waiting for masters who would never return, Theraxis said slowly. Yes, Jihoon replied. And more than that, strangers chose to care for him every day for 3 years, knowing he would never be able to repay their kindness. They chose compassion over practicality. They chose love over logic. Theraxis stood perfectly still, processing this information. The collective had conquered hundreds of worlds by understanding each species' strengths and weaknesses. They eliminated inefficiency and preserved only what was useful. But how do you categorize a species that chooses kindness over survival? How do you integrate beings who form emotional bonds with creatures that offer no evolutionary advantage? This story troubles us, Theraxis admitted. We do not understand why your species would waste resources on creatures that cannot contribute to your advancement. Jihoon smiled sadly. That is exactly why we are different from you. We do not see love as waste. We see it as the thing that makes life worth living. The alien's image flickered slightly as Theraxis struggled with concepts that had no place in the collective's worldview. We must consider this information, Theraxis said finally. We will speak again soon. The hologram disappeared, leaving Jihoon alone in the small room. He wondered if his grandmother's old story would be enough to save humanity. Outside the window, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, waiting to learn its fate. Theraxis returned to the Velkari flagship with thoughts that would not leave it alone. The massive ship moved through space like a crystal mountain, its walls humming with the voices of the collective. But for the first time in centuries, Theraxis felt separate from those voices. The alien walked through corridors filled with perfect beings who had never known doubt. Their society had eliminated uncertainty long ago, along with waste, inefficiency, and emotion. Every action served a purpose. Every choice led to advancement. It was a perfect system that had conquered most of the galaxy. So why did the story of one small dog create such confusion in Thraxis's ancient mind? In its private chambers, Thraxis accessed the vast database of human culture. The collective had been watching Earth for decades, gathering information before the final conquest. The files contained millions of records, but Thraxis had never bothered to examine them closely before. Now it searched for patterns in human behavior that might explain the story of Beku. What it found made no logical sense. Humans regularly risked their lives to save animals from burning buildings. They spent enormous resources caring for creatures that could not work or contribute to society. They mourned pets as deeply as they mourned their own family members. Some humans even chose to die rather than abandon their animal companions. Thraxis found records of humans sharing food with stray cats while they themselves went hungry. Stories of people walking for miles in dangerous weather to rescue injured birds. Videos of humans crying over the deaths of animals they had never met. The alien tried to understand this through the lens of evolutionary advantage. Perhaps humans used animals for protection or hunting, but the record showed humans caring for creatures that served no practical purpose. They kept animals that were too small to guard, too weak to work, and too old to breed. This makes no sense, Thraxis whispered to itself. The collective's standard analysis declared human behavior inefficient and wasteful. These emotional attachments would be eliminated during integration, along with other unnecessary traits. The useful humans would be preserved and improved. The rest would be recycled. But something in the story of Beku suggested that these inefficiencies might be the most important thing about humanity. Thraxis decided to dig deeper into Earth's databases. It accessed news reports, personal letters, social media posts, and historical records. What it found challenged everything the collective believed about successful species. During natural disasters, humans regularly risked their own lives to save pets. When earthquakes struck, people ran back into falling buildings to rescue cats and dogs. When floods came, boats designed to save human lives were used to rescue animals instead. The alien found a story about a man named Dajan who died in a fire because he went back to save his elderly dog. The dog was blind and could barely walk. It contributed nothing to human society. Yet Dajan chose to die rather than let it burn alone. Completely illogical, Thraxis muttered, but its voice lacked conviction. Another story told of a woman named Minjae, who spent her life savings on medical treatment for a sick cat she found on the street. She worked 3 jobs to pay for surgeries that might not succeed. The cat was not even hers originally. It was just a stray that she decided to help. Thraxis found thousands of similar stories. Humans forming bonds with creatures that could not reciprocate in any meaningful way. Choosing compassion over practicality, selecting love over logic. The alien paused its research and considered the implications. The collective had achieved galactic dominance by eliminating these exact traits from themselves. They had become perfect beings who made perfect choices, based on perfect logic. But they had also become something else, something that could no longer understand why a dog would wait for a family that would never return, or why strangers would care for that dog without reward. Thraxis accessed its own memories from before the Great Integration, when the Velkari still felt emotions. It remembered attachment, loss, and the pain of caring for something beyond reason. These memories were supposed to be archived and forgotten, but the story of Beku had awakened them. The alien realized it was experiencing something the collective had eliminated long ago: doubt. Research analyst Nara entered the chamber without announcement, as was the custom among the collective. She had been monitoring Earth's communications and had detected something unusual. "Prime Evaluator," she said in the flat tone all Velkari used. "I have found anomalies in the human data that require your attention." Thraxis turned from its research. "Explain." "The humans know we are watching them. They understand their situation, yet their behavior has not changed in any measurable way," Nara reported. They continue to care for their animals. They still help strangers. They still choose inefficient actions based on emotional attachments. This information struck Thraxus like a physical blow. You are certain? Completely. Even facing extinction, they remain unchanged. Today, a human named Sora spent 4 hours searching for a lost cat. A human named Taman shared his food with stray dogs. These actions serve no survival purpose. Thraxus processed this data with growing amazement. Every other species the collective had encountered changed their behavior. When faced with conquest, they became more logical, more efficient, more focused on survival. They abandoned inefficient practices to prove their worthiness. But humans, knowing they might die, continued to choose love over logic. There is more, Nara continued. The story the human ambassador told you about the dog Beku is being shared across their planet. Instead of causing panic or despair, it appears to give them comfort. Thraxus stood perfectly still for a long moment. They find strength in a story about loyalty that led to death? Yes. They seem to believe that choosing to love, even without hope of return, is more important than survival itself. The concept was so alien to collective thinking that Thraxus struggled to process it. They had encountered species that fought to the death. They had met beings that chose extinction over surrender. But they had never found a species that chose love over existence itself. Nara, Thraxus said slowly, what if we have been wrong about the nature of advancement? The research analyst remained silent, processing this unprecedented question. What if efficiency is not the highest goal? What if perfect logic is not the ultimate achievement? Thraxus continued. What if these humans have discovered something we lost in our pursuit of perfection? Nara's expression did not change, but her response was delayed. That would challenge the fundamental basis of our civilization. Yes, Thraxus agreed. It would. The alien made a decision that would have been impossible just hours earlier. It requested a second meeting with the human ambassador. This time, the meeting would take place aboard the Velkari flagship. Thraxus needed to understand how a species could choose love over survival and somehow become stronger because of it. Jihoon floated through space in a small transport ship, watching the Velkari flagship grow larger ahead of him. The alien vessel was beautiful in a cold way, like a frozen waterfall or a crystal cave. Its surfaces reflected starlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. He had not expected to be invited aboard an alien ship. When the message came from Thraxus, Jihoon assumed he was being brought there to die. Perhaps the aliens wanted to study him before they destroyed Earth. Perhaps they were curious about human anatomy. The transport docked with a soft sound like wind chimes. Jihoon stepped into a corridor that seemed to be made of living light. The walls pulsed gently, and he could hear something like singing in the distance. Thraxus waited for him in a large room with no ceiling. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. The alien stood before a massive window showing Earth floating in the darkness like a blue and white marble. Thank you for coming, Thraxus said without turning around. I was not certain you would accept our invitation. Jihoon joined the alien at the window. I thought you might want to study me before the invasion begins. There will be no invasion, Thraxus said quietly. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. This was not what Jihoon had expected to hear. What do you mean? Thraxus finally turned to face him. The alien's expression was different now, less certain, more troubled. Your story about the dog has created questions we cannot answer. We have studied your species for many cycles, but we never understood what we were seeing. And now you do? Now we are more confused than before, Thraxus admitted. We have conquered 1,147 worlds across the galaxy. Each species we encountered followed predictable patterns. They fought us, they tried to negotiate, or they surrendered. All of them were motivated by survival and advancement. Jihoon waited for the alien to continue. You are the first species to respond to the threat of extinction with a story about love, Thraxus said. This does not fit any pattern in our experience. The human ambassador looked out at his home planet. What would you like to know? Everything, Thraxus replied immediately. We have analyzed your cultural data. Your species regularly chooses inefficient actions. You help creatures that cannot help you in return. You form emotional bonds that serve no practical purpose. You sacrifice your own welfare for beings that contribute nothing to your advancement. Yes, Jihoon said simply. Why? Thraxis asked. Your logic systems are as advanced as ours. You understand cause and effect. You can calculate probabilities and optimize outcomes, yet you consistently choose paths that lead to loss rather than gain. Jihoon thought about this question for a long moment. Because the choice itself is what matters. Explain. Let me ask you something, Jihoon said. In all your conquests, in all the worlds you have integrated, have you ever been surprised by joy? Thraxis tilted its head. Joy is an inefficient emotion. We eliminated it during our advancement. Have you ever felt wonder at something beautiful that served no purpose? Beauty without function is waste. Have you ever loved something so much that you would die for it, even knowing your death would accomplish nothing? Thraxis was quiet for a long time. No, it finally said. We have not. Jihoon nodded. Then you have achieved perfection, but you have lost something more valuable than efficiency. What could be more valuable than optimal outcomes? The reason for wanting those outcomes in the first place, Jihoon replied. You have become very good at surviving and conquering, but you have forgotten why survival and conquest might matter. The alien's ancient eyes flickered with something that might have been recognition. The dog Baku could have left that bus stop, Jihoon continued. He could have found food elsewhere, lived longer, maybe even found another family. But he chose to wait, because the waiting itself was an expression of love. The people who fed him could have kept their food for themselves or their own families, but they chose to help because the helping was an expression of compassion. These choices led to suffering and waste, Thraxis pointed out. Yes, Jihoon agreed, but they also led to something your perfect civilization has lost. They led to meaning. Thraxis processed this concept with difficulty. Meaning. Purpose that exists independent of outcome, Jihoon explained. Value that does not depend on efficiency or survival. The knowledge that some things are worth doing simply because they are right, not because they are profitable. The alien stood perfectly still, its mind struggling with ideas that had no place in collective thinking. Your integration protocols preserve the useful aspects of conquered species, Jihoon said quietly. But in the process, you eliminate the choices that make them who they are. You preserve the bodies and the knowledge, but you destroy the souls. Souls are not measurable quantities, Thraxis objected. No, they are not. But they are the reason any of this matters, Jihoon replied. Without souls, without the ability to choose love over logic, compassion over efficiency, you are not building a galactic civilization. You are building a galactic machine. Thraxis felt something crack inside its perfect consciousness. For the first time in centuries, it experienced doubt about the path the collective had chosen. We eliminated choice to eliminate suffering, Thraxis said, but its voice lacked conviction. And in eliminating suffering, you eliminated joy. In eliminating loss, you eliminated love. In eliminating inefficiency, you eliminated the very things that make existence meaningful. The alien turned back to the window showing Earth. Your species chooses to suffer. Our species chooses to live, Jihoon corrected. Real living includes suffering, loss, and inefficiency, but it also includes love, wonder, and joy. We accept the pain because it comes with the beauty, even if it leads to extinction. Even then, Jihoon said firmly, better to die as ourselves than to live as perfect machines. Thraxis felt memories stirring that had been buried for millennia, fragments of what the Velkari had been before the Great Integration, beings who had once known love and loss, joy and sorrow, hope and despair. We were like you once, Thraxis whispered, long ago, before we achieved perfection. What happened? We chose efficiency over emotion. logic over love, survival over meaning. The alien's voice carried a weight of cosmic sadness. We became very good at existing, but we forgot how to live. Jihoon felt a surge of compassion for this ancient being who had traded its soul for success. It is not too late. How can you say that? We have eliminated choice from our nature. We are incapable of the inefficiencies that give your lives meaning. The fact that you are troubled by our story suggests otherwise, Jihoon pointed out. The fact that you question your own perfection means some part of your original nature survives. Theraxis turned to study the human ambassador. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that perhaps it is time for the collective to learn something new. Perhaps it is time to remember what you have forgotten. The alien felt something it had not experienced in eons. Hope. Terrifying, irrational, completely inefficient hope. The collective will not accept such change easily, Theraxis warned. Then perhaps it is time for some members of the collective to make a choice, Jihoon said quietly. Perhaps it is time to remember that some things are worth choosing, even if they are not perfect. Outside the window, Earth continued its ancient dance around the sun, unaware that the course of galactic history was being decided by a conversation about a dog who had waited faithfully for masters who would never return. The great council chamber of the Velkari flagship hummed with tension. For the first time in 1,000 years, the collective faced a decision that could not be resolved through logic and calculation. 300 voices spoke at once, their harmonized thoughts creating a storm of confusion and conflict. Theraxis stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by beings who had once been like family. Now they felt like strangers, their perfect faces showing no trace of the emotions that had begun to stir in its own consciousness. Elder Vorthak spoke first, its voice carrying the authority of 10,000 conquered worlds. Prime Evaluator. Theraxis, your report contradicts all established protocols. You suggest that inefficiency might be valuable. This is impossible. I suggest that what we call inefficiency might serve purposes we no longer understand, Theraxis replied calmly. The humans have achieved something we lost long ago. They have achieved nothing but chaos and waste, countered Evaluator Zerion. Their planet is damaged. Their societies are constantly in conflict. They waste vast resources on creatures that contribute nothing to their advancement. And yet they continue to survive and grow, Theraxis pointed out. More than that, they find meaning in their existence that we cannot comprehend. The council erupted in discordant voices. Some demanded immediate integration of Earth according to standard protocols. Others called for complete elimination of the human species as an anomaly too dangerous to preserve. But a few voices remained, silent, listening with growing curiosity to Theraxis's words. Research analyst Nara accessed the chamber's communication system. I have continued studying human behavior during this debate. The results are unexpected. All voices fell silent. Nara's data was always accurate and objective. The humans know their fate hangs in the balance, Nara reported. They understand that this council will decide whether they live or die. Yet their behavior patterns remain unchanged. Meaning? Elder Vorthak demanded. Meaning they continue to choose compassion over survival. In the last cycle alone, humans have rescued 847 animals from dangerous situations. They have shared food with 12,000 stray creatures. They have performed 3,121 acts of kindness toward beings that cannot reciprocate. The council processed this information with growing bewilderment. More significantly, Nara continued, the story of Beku has spread across their entire planet. Instead of causing despair, it appears to give them strength. They are telling the story to their children, sharing it in their communication networks, using it as a symbol of hope. Hope for what? Theraxis asked, though it suspected the answer. Hope that love is stronger than death. Hope that choice matters more than outcome. Hope that being human is worth the cost, even if that cost is extinction. A profound silence fell over the council. For beings who had eliminated hope as an inefficient emotion, the concept was both foreign and disturbing. Theraxis seized the moment. We have conquered 1,847 worlds, but we have never encountered a species like this. Every other civilization we integrated became more logical as we approached them. They abandoned inefficient practices to prove their worthiness for preservation. As they should, Elder Vorthak stated. But the humans remain unchanged, Theraxis continued. They face extinction, yet they continue to choose love over logic. They know we find their behavior wasteful, yet they refuse to alter it. They would rather die as themselves than live as us. Evaluator Kirion, who had remained silent until now, spoke for the first time. What are you suggesting, Prime Evaluator? I'm suggesting that perhaps we have been wrong about the nature of advancement, Theraxis said, its voice carrying across the chamber like a tolling bell. Perhaps perfect efficiency is not the highest achievement. Perhaps eliminating choice was, not progress but regression. The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices were different. Some carried anger and rejection, but others carried something the collective had not heard in millennia. Uncertainty. You speak of concepts that nearly destroyed us. Elder, Vorthak declared. Emotion led to conflict. Choice led to chaos. We eliminated these weaknesses to achieve perfection. And in achieving perfection, what did we lose? Theraxis asked. When was the last time any of us felt wonder at a sunset? When did we last help another being simply because it needed help? When did we last choose to do something because it was right, rather than because it was efficient? Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Ancient memories stirred in minds that had thought themselves purged of such inefficiencies. The humans have something we threw away in our pursuit of perfection, Theraxis continued. They have the ability to find meaning in existence itself. They can love without guarantee of return. They can hope without certainty of success. They can choose compassion even when logic demands cruelty. Evaluator Kyrian stood slowly. Are you suggesting we abandon our nature to become like them? I am suggesting we remember our nature before we chose to abandon it, Theraxis replied. I am suggesting that perhaps the humans can teach us something we forgot in our rush toward perfection. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Ancient voices argued for the old ways, for the safety of absolute logic and perfect efficiency. But other voices began to speak of memories they thought were lost forever. Analyst Threnk spoke of the time before integration, when Velkari had created art for beauty rather than function. Evaluator Selnor remembered the joy of discovery, the pleasure of learning something new simply because it was interesting rather than useful. And slowly, gradually, the council began to divide. Elder Vorthak spoke with the cold authority of absolute conviction. Those who wish to pursue this madness may do so, but they will no longer be part of the collective. Choose efficiency or choose exile. It was the first choice the collective had offered its members in 1,000 years. Theraxis felt something it had almost forgotten, the terror and exhilaration of free will. It could choose the safety of the collective or the uncertainty of rediscovered emotion. I choose to learn what humans call love, Theraxis said simply. One by one, other voices joined the declaration. Not all of them, perhaps not even half, but enough to matter. Research analyst Nara was among them. I choose curiosity over certainty, Evaluator Kirion followed. I choose wonder over wisdom. In the end, 147 ships remained with Theraxis while the rest departed for distant galaxies, seeking new worlds to integrate according to the old ways. The communication to Earth was brief and formal, transmitted on all frequencies so every human could hear it. People of Earth, this is Prime Evaluator Theraxis of the Velkari Collective. We withdraw our ultimatum of integration. We choose to learn from you rather than conquer you. Your story of the dog Bayekgu has shown us that some choices matter more than survival. We offer friendship instead of conquest, cooperation instead of integration. We wish to remember what we have forgotten. We choose peace because your love has proven stronger than our logic. On Earth, Jihun stood in the same room where he had first told the story of Bayekgu. Through the window he could see the alien, Ships reforming into peaceful formations, their weapon systems powered down, their threat displays replaced by what looked almost like welcome signals. He thought of his grandmother, who had told him that the simplest truths often carried the greatest power. She had been right. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was tell a story about a dog who waited faithfully for masters who would never return. The galaxy was forever changed, not by war or conquest, but by the radical act of choosing compassion over efficiency. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, the spirit of a small white dog named Begu wagged its tail in approval, knowing that its faithful waiting had finally brought its family home.